Play to win your share of $1 million every week this football season at DraftKings.com. With 1 week fantasy at DraftKings, you can play when you want with a team you want. Just pick your contest, pick your team, and pick up your winnings. Hurry to DraftKings.com now. Use code FINE and play for free with your first deposit in Sunday's $1 million fantasy contest. This isn't fantasy as usual. This is DraftKings. Welcome to the big time. Enter FINE for free entry now only at DraftKings.com. That's DraftKings.com.
The Pirates and Cardinals have the best 2 records in baseball, and they go head-to-head one final time this regular season. Could this be a preview of next week's division series? Coverage begins Wednesday at 6:30 Eastern on ESPN Radio. Opinion. Must hear radio. This is the Paul Finebaum Show. And now, Paul Finebaum.
Final hour of the program. Glad to have you on board, and we are always excited to have Laura Rutledge on, who we talked to quite often on Friday afternoon from site 2 weeks ago at Kyle Field, last week in Georgia, this week Columbia, Missouri. Laura, let's start in Athens. You were there most recently, and that is the game of the week in the SEC. I realize it was a sad scene at times, but just in terms of being around the Georgia program, what do you pick up from them as they get ready for Bama?
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting week for them, I think, and obviously they didn't want to look past Southern and what they were bringing to the table, but there was definitely a feel that Alabama was on the horizon for them when we were there, and I think what Grayson Lambert can do is really one of the biggest topics for them right now. It was kind of like, what is the real Grayson Lambert? Because we saw what he did against Vanderbilt, didn't look very good. Then, of course, he goes out, sets an NCAA passing record against South Carolina. He looks unstoppable. I think the real Grayson Lambert is somewhere in between there, but what Brian Schottenheimer has done to work with him and get him coached up to where he's doing what he's doing is really incredible. And we talked about it a little bit when I talked to you on Friday, but they've got these RPOs, the run-pass options, that a lot of people do in college football. It's not some newfangled deal here, but it really has allowed him to be more comfortable when you've got Nick Chubb, Sony Michel, Keith Marshall. I mean, the list goes on for who you can hand the ball off to or, get it to in a quick pass or something like that. It gives him the opportunity to be a lot more comfortable. But this is going to be a big test for him. We're going to know, truly who Grayson Lambert is. And I think on the Alabama side of things, we're going to see, what can they do against a Georgia defense that is so young.
We've talked with a lot of people today, and maybe it is early in the week, and maybe we're just used to big, epic games every week, which we're getting. But this game in July looked like the game of the year, maybe outside of the Iron Bowl. And this one still looks like it's held up, but that Alabama loss has affected it, and Georgia fans seem to be a little bothered by the fact that Alabama's not marching in here number 2 in the country.
Yeah, because I think that's what everybody wanted. I think Georgia fans were kind of licking their chops at this whole situation, saying, hey, let's see what we can do against an Alabama team that, like you said, is a highly ranked team. Now, of course, they're not. I still think Georgia fans, though, and I got the impression just from being there that they're a little nervous about this one. Yeah. I think if you look at the way the two teams match up, this is the type of offense that Alabama wants to see from a defensive perspective. This is what they're built to defend. So if you look at what Georgia's going to want to do, how they're going to want to run the ball, they are a pro-style offense, even if they mix in some tempo. It is a good matchup, I guess, if you will, for what Alabama wants to do defensively, and I think that gives Georgia fans a little bit to be nervous about. That said, Georgia certainly looked good this season, and they've looked very good offensively.
Yeah, Nick Saban as an underdog is a little more unpredictable than Nick Saban as a favorite. Lately, the favorite role has not been, has gone too well. You're going to be in Columbia this weekend, Columbia, Missouri, South Carolina, and Missouri. But 2 weeks ago, you were in College Station, and that's where one of the featured attractions will be this weekend with State in A&M. Your takeaway from A&M this past weekend, they look done, and then here they come again with a reprise of last year's game.
Right. It's going to be, I think, a huge test for Kyle Allen, but I think he sets up well against this Mississippi State defense. I think what they're going to try to do, they're going to stretch the field. He's shown that he can be accurate. He's shown he has some weapons at the wide receiver position. Of course, Christian Kirk, somebody that I think, why are we not talking about him maybe in even the Heisman conversation? I mean, he's just dynamic.
Well, it's all about Leonard Fournette.
Well, exactly, but let's throw Christian Kirk in there a little bit more. He's somebody that can do so much for them offensively. You'll see him be a big go-to target for Kyle Allen. And then you've got Kyler Murray, who I still think is such an interesting part of their offense. They can bring him in. He can use his legs. He's shown he's dynamic. He's so fast, you can't touch him. And then defensively for A&M, John Chavis has already made such an impact on that defense. They're more aggressive. I think you're going to see night and day difference from the A&M defense that we saw against Mississippi State last year. We're talking about a much improved defense that can do so much more. And Chavis, of course, has a ton to do with that. Myles Garrett at the defensive end position makes a huge difference for everything that they're going to be doing.
Chatting with Laura Rutledge, and certainly you were one of the first who warned us about Tennessee. We should have taken stock of your comments. It's a mess up there right now, and a lot of people don't think it should be.
Yeah, it is interesting because I will say they've only had the one conference loss, but it feels like much worse than that, and it feels like it's going to continue to get worse. And I think what we're looking at here is just such a young Tennessee team. You keep thinking, all right, they've got all this talent. Butch Jones has recruited so well. Why are we not seeing it on the field? And I think some of that falls on the coaching side of things. Some of it falls on the decision-making side of things, but a lot of it's execution as well. And why, when you have Jalen Hurd and Alvin Kamara and Josh Dobbs, who can run and make things happen, why are you not winning these games? And it's been these late fourth quarter collapses that, have us all scratching our heads. But I will say, and I'm not trying to toot my horn here, I'm not scratching my head that hard because I did see the youth coming into this season, and I thought there were a lot of question marks there.
Yeah, and Saturday in Knoxville is so intriguing because, the loser of any SEC game isn't in good shape, but the loser of this game is in disastrous shape.
Yeah.
There's just no getting around it.
I know, and it's kind of like, who needs it worse? I'm not sure, because I think both Arkansas and Tennessee need this win in such a bad way. Brett Bielema, though, I almost think he needs it a little bit worse. I think coming into this season, we thought, or at least I thought, maybe a little more of Arkansas than even I thought of Tennessee. And what Arkansas has shown me is really just kind of unbelievable. I think a lot of it has to do with Jonathan Williams going down. I'm not saying he would have saved the team, but I think the lack of run game that they've shown has a lot to do with that. They've certainly dealt with some injuries. But 1.2 on those two teams, I think less of the blame falls on Bielema as far as in-game stuff goes than, in the Tennessee situation. I think more blame can fall on the coaching staff there than it does at Arkansas.
One person that doesn't seem to be getting much blame is Gus Malzahn, and I'm puzzled by that because to me he's the one that anointed Jeremy Johnson, and he is the mastermind, the genius, and so far he looks pretty average.
Yeah, it's interesting to me, too, on that, because you would think, and what Gus Malzahn does so well is building these offenses around his players and using them to make things happen that he is a mastermind of. Why he didn't see maybe more insufficiencies with Jeremy Johnson is very perplexing, because I would think that would have shown itself earlier than it has. And maybe it's been, he looks great in practice and doesn't translate to the game, but, certainly on paper, you would think what Jeremy Johnson wants to do fits in well with what Gus Malzahn wants to do, and he has the athletic ability to make it happen, but we haven't seen that. I think some of it does fall on the O-line, some of it falls on maybe we thought more out of the offensive weapons that we thought they had. Maybe they don't have as much, or at least they haven't been as consistent, but I just think some of the decision-making from Jeremy Johnson has been certainly suspect, and you wonder what Gus Malzahn saw that we're not seeing now.
Finally, Laura, you head to Columbia, Missouri this weekend, and any game Steve Spurrier is in is interesting. It's hard to ask a question about him right now because there's so many unknowns. Right. But where do you think his head is? As a lot of whispers out there about what's going on with his future.
Yeah, I think he really is focused on what's happening with this team because I think that's how he is. He really wants to win games, and right now it seems like he feels like Lorenzo Nunez is the answer to that. He had some high praises for him, saying that the hope of the season is on this freshman quarterback. So I do think he's focused on that, but you have to wonder. I mean, what does he do from here after this season? It's not looking pretty for South Carolina at this point. He's going to obviously coach this team to the best of his ability, but you do wonder about the question marks there, and I think Spurrier is a guy that will obviously be as professional and as Steve Spurrier as he always is, but he has to be thinking, all right, what's next after this Pharaoh Cooper situation?
Yeah, you got to be thinking, why did I come back?
Right.
Because the path to the future looks pretty grim, but all it takes is a win or two, and
just give the ball to Pharaoh Cooper.
Yeah,
why not? Keep it that way.
I bet they try in Columbia this weekend. Laura Rutledge, she's hosting SEC Now later on the SEC Network, and obviously it will be in Columbia this weekend. Laura, it's always great to catch up.
Thanks for having me.
You bet. We'll take a break. We'll go to College Station a little bit later in the program. We'll talk to Brent Zwerneman out there about the Aggies. They've been a big topic today, so has Bama and Georgia. We'll take a break. Back with more of your calls when we return.
Individuals
Welcome you back to the program. Looking forward to getting some more phone calls here at 855-242-7285. The Alabama fan base has been very quiet this week. Could it be a lack of confidence, some nervousness, some questions about Nick Saban and the Crimson Tide? Let's find out. Legend is up next. What do you say, Legend?
Yeah! Time to get pumped up, Paul.
I know, Legend, having spoken to you for many years, you really fear the Georgia Bulldogs, don't you?
Oh, yes, I'm trembling. I was trembling in 2008 when they had Matthew Stafford, who's, by the way, is turned into Jay Cutler now. And I believe they also had A.J. Green, and I believe Noshawn Marino was on that team, too. And it got pretty ugly quick. We turned that Bulldog into a poodle pretty quick. Here's the thing, Paul. The playoffs has already started for Alabama, baby. That's the mindset that we have to take. And I know some players, and that's the mindset they got. We were so devastated by that Ole Miss game that we are in a desperate situation right now. I mean, we can't lose this game because at Alabama, Paul, we don't play for 10-3. We don't play for second place. Georgia, they hang banners for finishing third in the East. We don't do that, Paul. We don't do that at Alabama. We are desperate, baby. And this is a epic gridiron war right here. And here's the thing, and you tell me if you agree with me or not. Mark Richt can run the table. But if he loses to Alabama, he keeps a reputation that he can't win a big game. Do you agree with that or not?
I completely agree. Yeah,
and here's the thing. When Nick Saban stepped on the field in 2008, this is what he said to Mark Richt. The champ is here. The champ is here. Because we are the Muhammad Ali of college football, baby. And this reminds me of Ali and Foreman. Everybody I talk to is talking about how Georgia's going to beat down Alabama this weekend. Well, you said that before, Bulldog, and we turned you into that poodle. That's because you can count the champ out. You can claim that the king is dead. But deep in the heart of the Alabama football team still lies a champion, baby, and our destiny is still in our hands. And we can rise to the occasion just like Ali did with Foreman. Because at the end of the day, I don't think Georgia can beat us, because at the end of the day, that Bulldog at heart truly is a poodle when it comes to kicking down the door and proclaiming to the nation that we are a national championship team. Not a 10-2 team, not a 9-3 team, but an elite team, Paul. I don't think they can do it. And before I get off, Paul, let me say this, because it's the only thing that's been bringing me laughter through the college football season. Terry Bowden Jr. Hey, I agree totally with Darryl from Georgia. Great call today. You know, we're going to beat you, dude, and in your heart you know we're going to turn that Bulldog to a food on Saturday. But I agree totally with him. You got to live with Jeremy Johnson. You done put in a freshman. I don't even know his name. What is it, Stan White Jr. or something like that? I mean, this ship is sinking quicker than the Titanic. Sports Illustrated done recalled all their college football preview books because it's causing uncontrollable laughter and putting people in an insane ward. Terry Bowden Jr. with the coach as my team and Bama as my team. You saved the season for me, Gus Boss. Love you, Paul. Peace out, brother.
Good to hear from you. Appreciate the call. Let's go to Fran next in New Haven. Hello, Fran.
Hello. Hi, Paul.
Good afternoon.
Hi, Paul. How are you?
I'm well. Thank you very much.
All right, good. Listen, I'm a long-time listener. I enjoy your show. I enjoy it. I'm an Alabama fan. I got an observation that I make, and I want your opinion on it. I watch this Alabama. It looks like they're tighter than a drum. Coker looks down the field with one eye. The other one, he's looking at the sideline to get yanked. It just seems that they got to be looser and play. When the defense comes off, Saban's in the middle, and I think Saban's a great coach. When the offense comes off, instead of kicking, Saban's in the middle. I think they got to loosen up. I want to know. The body language doesn't look good. Just your opinion. Thank you.
I think that's a fair statement, but there's usually a reason why coaches look like that, and they're just not confident in what they have on the team, and particularly at the quarterback position. And I mean, Nick Saban is always a very confident coach for this reason, because he believes in his process. He believes that he has put the best players he can. He believes he has a good plan. Although I didn't see that against Ole Miss. To me, it was a panic move. I understand why they did it. I've spoken to coaches there. I understand the rationale and the reasoning. It just didn't work. Thanks for the call. Appreciate it very much. Steve is next up. Steve, thank you. Good afternoon.
Hey, Paul. How you doing tonight?
I'm doing great.
That fellow down at Darryl from Columbus, Georgia, what's he smoking down there? He must be smoking something. I live about 40 miles from him. I can just smell him all the way up there.
Where's up here?
Up here in Valley, Alabama, about 40 miles south of Columbus, Georgia. That's why I think that's where he's from, Columbus,
Yeah,
Georgia.
that's where he lives. Yeah. Well, I tell you what, you ought to become a hunting dog if you can smell 40 miles away.
Well, it's strong. We're talking about the offense is better and the defense is better and the kicking game is better. I don't know what the world he's. I guess he puts all that on because he beat South Carolina. Is that what he put it on?
I guess. Well, hey, don't forget, they also beat Vanderbilt. That's the problem. Georgia hasn't really beaten anyone yet, but Alabama has a win over Wisconsin. Is that impressive? Banks is up next in Charlotte. Hello, Banks. Good afternoon.
Paul, thanks for taking my call, bud.
Thank you.
Yeah, as far as your caller's not having a lot to talk about Georgia, Alabama, from a trash talking point of view, I'm pretty neutral observer. I'm NC State grad for whatever that's worth. But anyway, so we kind of think, it's almost like they're on the opposite sides of the league, which obviously we know. Georgia plays Auburn on a regular basis. Alabama plays Tennessee. This is almost like somebody that's in the way of what the goal is, and it's not like a regular, say Auburn, Alabama, or even a, LSU, Auburn, that type, Georgia, Tennessee, Georgia, South Carolina, Georgia, Florida, however you want to go about it. But anyhow, I just think that it's almost like, God, we got to play this team this year, instead of we're going to play this team, we're going to whoop up on them. That type of deal from both sides, really.
Listen, I appreciate the call very much. Nice of you to be with us. Let's continue. Kaysen is next up in Missouri. Hello, Kaysen. Good afternoon.
Hey, Paul. Thanks for having me on. How are you?
I'm well. Thanks for the call.
Hey, I want to know what you thought about Leonard Fournette. Because I personally think that he is overrated.
Really?
The dude averages 8.2 yards a carry, right? But that leads a 6'1", 230 running back straight to the secondary. I mean, of course he runs through those the secondary tacklers. I mean, it's easy. I mean, his O-line does such a good job. I'd really like to see how well he does in a pro offense or against Alabama or Ole Miss. What do you think?
Well, I think you make a fair point, and while everyone is incredibly impressed, and listen, I've heard every comparison from Leonard to Herschel Walker to Adrian Peterson. I heard one yesterday from my friend Gene Wojciechowski, who did a piece on him for Game Day, to Eric Dickerson from the 80s, Bo Jackson. I mean, I have not heard a player compared to that many great players in memory, but I do think he will be tested ultimately against the good defenses, if not the great defense of the SEC. He has not yet. Auburn's defense was mediocre, and obviously Syracuse and everyone else. Mississippi State has a good defense, but I wouldn't put them in Alabama's category yet.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much. Yeah, I just thought I'd like to see him.
But I'm not willing to say he's overrated. I just think that the question I have is he as good as some of these great players that I've mentioned? I think he can be. And maybe he already is, but do not call Leonard Fournette overrated. I will not go along with you on that. Thanks for the call. Really do appreciate it. And let's check in with Thule, who is in South Carolina. Hello, Thule.
Hey, Paul. How you doing, bud?
Pretty well.
Just a quick little rundown on Legend, I believe. First of all, he sounded like a horse chewing cud. Don't know much about the guy, but he wants to talk trash about my dogs. But I'm going to go ahead and give him a little bit, too. Yeah, they got their win last time, but they haven't been in Athens in a while. And, on this Leonard Fournette thing, Chubb, nobody's giving him any credit whatsoever. To a certain extent, as far as, should be winning the Heisman or whatever. But everybody's wanting to talk about Leonard Fournette, but they don't understand that Chubb is carrying the load, but he's also having to share those carries with Sonny Michel, Brendan Douglas, and all those other guys in the backfield. What's your take on the Heisman so-called running, with Leonard Fournette getting all the carries?
Well, here's the deal on the Heisman. And,
yes, sir.
Chubb has not had a big moment yet. And that will come Saturday. Playing Vanderbilt, not going to help you very much. To me, Saturday is Chubb's big day. Fournette can get 1,000 yards against Eastern Michigan, and it's not going to really make any difference. So that's the beginning of it. But Georgia has to win, and if Georgia wins the game and Chubb is the best player on the field, then he'll be in the contention. But it's up to what a player does, and I know some people get tired of hearing me say this, but you have to make your mark late in the season. You can be in contention in October or even late September, but you can't win it. Dak Prescott found that out last year when his team lost a game to Alabama. It seemed to knock him out of contention, and it will happen to Fournette if he loses one of the big games. Most of Fournette's big games are late in the season.
Yeah.
Thank you for the call. I mean, listen, did he look good against Auburn? Yes. Did he look great last week? Yes. But it will be a while, but, well, I take that back. It won't be that long. LSU plays Florida in about 2 weeks, so he'll get a big stage right there. And we have a big stage of 30 more minutes to go when we come back. We'll go to College Station, get an update on the Aggies, and more of your phone calls. Back with more.
Have you?
to the program. Glad to have you on board, and certainly a lot going on. We'll get some phone calls here in a second. Also, some more guests. Let's go to Rudy in Gainesville. Hey, Rudy. Good afternoon.
Hey, Paul. Thanks for taking my call.
You bet.
Yeah. I had a couple of comments. First off, you look good in the Florida jersey.
Thank you.
I got to go down and actually watch y'all broadcast in Gainesville. I'm the gentleman that was coach of Park in Jacksonville that Tebow had come through.
Oh, yeah. That was really cool to meet you down there.
Yeah.
I'll see you down there.
I'll say this, a couple of comments. You had a caller call up and question whether Josh Dobbs, should be the quarterback at Tennessee. Let me tell you, this kid is an athlete. He has done nothing wrong. Now, I'm a Gator fan, but he should have. He played a great game against Oklahoma. It wasn't his fault that they lost. And he played a great game against Florida. And it certainly wasn't his fault that they lost that game. In fact, they had an opportunity to win it at the end in spite of everything that Butch Jones did to try to make them lose. So, the kid is a great athlete, and he's fun to watch play. I did have another comment, and this is just from a coaching perspective, and I coached 25 years. My son is a big Georgia Bulldog fan, and I told him when Alabama lost to Ole Miss, I said, that is absolutely the worst thing that could have happened to the Georgia Bulldogs. It is because, as legend said, they are in a desperate situation, and listen, I would not want to play Alabama right now. I would not want to play them.
Well, really, when would anyone want to play Alabama, I think is the ultimate question. Let me bring Brent Zwerneman in from the Houston Chronicle to talk about this big game Saturday night in College Station at Kyle Field. Brent, thanks for the time. Really appreciate it, and certainly the Aggies come on the radar screen, they go off, and now they're back, and I don't think they're going anywhere when you look at the schedule coming in. But your assessment so far of what Texas A&M has done, still alive and doing quite well.
Absolutely, Paul, and I have an answer of when the Aggies would want to play Alabama. Going back to the end of that conversation, it's following a bye week and at home, coming off a 59-0 a year ago. Exactly what you just said, A&M's schedule sets up. I don't see it ever setting up better for the Aggies in their time in the SEC. Over the past few years, certainly, and in the future as well, with the way it's gone so far and what they've got ahead, with having the bye week next week after the Mississippi State game and then bringing Alabama to Kyle Field after that.
Yeah, no, you're right about that. And Alabama will have played, I believe, Georgia and Arkansas. So, well said. Let's talk about the Aggies, and so much conversation about John Chavis before the season. Looks like he's having an impact on the Aggies defense.
He is having an impact, and the Aggies really struggled against the run versus Arkansas. But without John Chavis, I don't know if they win that game, because they did make some late second half adjustments, and they didn't do everything right. They did quite a few things wrong, and they still come out with the victory. In terms of one of the things that was exposed for this defense is just having trouble stopping the run, and they're very thin. It's what we've talked about before, Paul. Very thin at linebacker, and that's being exposed at this point. They had another injury this past week in Otaro Alaka, who's a starter in the middle. So right now they're looking around for linebackers, and even John Chavis addressed that today, saying, hey, these guys have got to play better, and that's on me as the linebackers coach. But, yeah, to your point, it's a better overall defensive team, and part of that is they played so many freshmen last year, guys like Myles Garrett, Armani Watts at safety. Those guys are all a year older as well, so that's part of it, too, the maturation process for this defense as well.
Let me go back to the Arkansas game, and I know it was a win, and that matters in this league, but how many or what concerns are there from the coaching staff and from the Aggie Nation?
Well, that was exactly it, and they're looking back to last year saying, okay, it played out almost the same. The Aggies had a big fourth quarter comeback and then win in overtime against Arkansas, and as everyone knows, that's when it went south for A&M the next three games at Mississippi State. A&M had risen to number 6 in the nation at that point and get blown out. Ole Miss blown out again, and then obviously the 59-0 game was in there against Alabama. The concerns are on offensive line. They just haven't quite gelled to kind of get that running game going, and part of the reason they haven't gotten the running game going is they're almost as thin at running back as they are at linebacker, if that says something. So on the plus side, offensively, Kyle Allen continues to look better and better with each week. He's only had 9 starts in his career, and a big plus for the Aggies, a comforting thing for them is when they've been in tight games against Arizona State and Arkansas in the fourth quarter, that's when he's looked his best. I mean, he's really come through in the clutch, so that's been a positive. And the biggest positive for A&M has been Christian Kirk, another Arizonan, just like Kyle Allen, who's probably the most electric player A&M has seen on offense as a true freshman, going back 20 years to Leland McElroy around in there. I mean, he's just been absolutely dynamic for the Aggies.
Brent, let's talk a little bit about the bigger picture and A&M. And I realize you play the schedule, and in the SEC it takes care of itself. But before the season, there was a little bit of love for A&M. A couple of people, national writers and broadcasters, had them in the Final Four. They beat Arizona State, which some would say is not as big a deal as we thought it was on Labor Day weekend. Where do you think the love will start being directed toward the Aggies? I don't think Mississippi State is enough to awaken the nation. Is it Alabama coming up in a couple of weeks?
Yeah, and it's funny because you're talking about between A&M and Mississippi State, a couple of teams in the, Mississippi State is number 21, A&M's number 14, but I think it's the love is kind of going to continue to grow a little bit at that time, but I still think there are plenty of skeptics out there based on how much everything does look like last year. A year ago, A&M goes up to South Carolina in its opener and just whips the Gamecocks, beats Arkansas in overtime. Okay, now here comes that stretch that really caught up to the Aggies last year. Okay, so let's say they get past a Mississippi State team that obviously isn't as good or doesn't look as good as it did last year. You're right. If again, the schedule sets up so nicely for A&M. They're off October 10th. Setting up for that October 17th home game against Alabama. They beat the Crimson Tide at that point, and who knows where Alabama is in terms of their schedule. But if they do get past Alabama at that point, especially a year after 59-0, I think that's when you're really talking about, maybe a top 6 or 7 team at that point. And
suddenly you have an epic game on the 24th that I don't think anyone was really looking to be an epic game, and that's A&M at Ole Miss.
I don't think anyone had that one circled as epic game on the calendar in the summer, but you're absolutely right. And believe it or not, with A&M being the only SEC team from the state of Texas, that will be the first time A&M even leaves the state on this schedule. So yeah, it absolutely sets up because they're neutral site games. One was in Houston, one was in Dallas. And so that's the first time they truly go on the road. I can't emphasize enough how much this schedule sets up for the Aggies to do big things this year. And then October 24th game at Ole Miss could be huge, could be a top 5 game.
Yeah, no, and again, the Alabama game, which is always big, we don't know what that's going to mean. We'll know a lot more Saturday. That could be another elimination game for Alabama, or it could be, wow, here comes Alabama with 2 losses at least in the SEC. So that's just part of figuring out the schedule. I always thought the Auburn-Texas A&M game would be one of the defining moments of the season, and don't think that would be the case either.
My wife asked what game she would be the best one to go to. This was before the season to pick out tickets, and I said, A&M Auburn for sure. So yeah, it's not exactly setting up at this point, but A&M, of course, will take that because maybe that means that's one step closer to the Aggies winning their first SEC West title.
Yeah, but just for A&M fans who want to get overly confident, they do have that Ole Miss trip, and everyone knows where the season ends, and that is not going to be very friendly going to Baton Rouge.
Not at all, and if you talk to Kevin Sumlin, he's saying, he'd be getting on us right now about even talking about anything past Mississippi State, because the way he said it today is, the Aggies certainly are going to have their hands full, and And Mississippi State does kind of have a psychological advantage over the Aggies right now because they just put a pounding on A&M a year ago with many of these same players, on the A&M side of things. So that's certainly something A&M's going to have to overcome as well.
Well done, Brent Zwerneman from the Houston Chronicle, covers the Aggies. Brent, thanks for the time, as always.
Thanks, Paul. Appreciate you having me on.
How cool to talk to Brent, always one of our favorites. We'll take a break, 855-242-7285. A couple of more minutes to go on what's about to become Tuesday night. We'll be right back. We welcome you back to the program. Time now for the Dr. Pepper one-of-a-kind take. And the one-of-a-kind take involves the Tennessee Vols and Butch Jones. And we were just talking a few moments ago about what is at stake. This was a school and a coach that everyone really believed in and believed had turned the corner. I still think most do believe Butch Jones has the program heading in a very good direction. I know the schedule is difficult. I know the record 14-15 is the same as Derek Dooley, but really it wasn't until the final year that Derek Dooley's program just imploded. So I'm not sure those are fair comparisons. Anyway, we'll get back to the calls at 855-242-7285. Glad to have you on board. And Fred is in Plano, Texas. How are you, Fred?
Paul, I'm madder than a hornet in a bumblebee's hive. I've been listening. I heard a guy call in, I guess about 3 callers ago, talking about Leonard Fournette being overrated. And listen, you said this last week, it's a long way to go for the Heisman and all those individual awards. But for somebody to call into your show who has watched any football this year and to say that Leonard Fournette, the most dominant football player in college football this year, is overrated in any way, must not have watched the games, and must not know about the character of this guy. This is the guy who, when he won Prep Player of the Year, gave his award away to a guy at a competing high school. When he was named the Player of the Week after the Auburn game, gave the award away to his fullback. You tell me what's overrated about a guy who's great on the field and a guy that you would want to be your teammate, a guy that you would want to go into battle with, who exemplifies the character that we talk about so often in college football, and then get let down by the players and the coaches who let bad guys transfer onto their teams. This guy exemplifies anything you want. What is overrated about that, Paul Finebaum? You tell me, because I was disappointed in the fact that you did not stand up strongly enough.
Well, hey, hold on a second, Fred. Hey, Fred, quit your screaming for a second. I did stand up. I took exception to it. There's not a whole lot else I can do.
Paul, at the very end, you did admit that you could not agree with the fact that he was overrated.
What am I supposed to say? Should I have the guy arrested because he gave an opinion on Leonard Fournette?
This is what you do, Paul. And you know that he's played one less game than every other back, and he's still only like 75 yards behind the number one back in the country who has 35 more carries than him. Let me tell you what you do. This is what we do back here down in Texas. If somebody tells you something you know is patently absurd, this is what you do. You say, hold up, buddy. I can't go with you on that. This is where I get off right now. That's the way you handle that.
Well, here's what I do with most callers, Fred. I let them talk and give their opinion, just like I've let you talk and give your opinion. And sometimes I agree, sometimes I disagree, and sometimes I just shake my head. Let's move along. Jerry is up next in Memphis. Good afternoon, Jerry.
Hey, Paul. Thanks for taking my call.
Thank you.
Hey, Paul. I'm out here looking for Tennessee's passing game. I mean, what happened to it?
You might want to call the FBI.
I know. The offensive coordinator needs to be fired. I mean, if we didn't learn anything.
Okay, Jerry, I would have to say that's a great point. Let's move along and talk to Steve in West Texas. Hello, Steve. Good afternoon.
Hey, Paul. How you doing today? Great show.
You bet.
You know, the Alabama-Georgia game was a huge game back in the 60s, and I know that's a long time ago, but it was the centerpiece about 50 years ago for the most famous libel suit in the history of this country. At least it was for 40 or 50 years. It was even in the textbook. And you never hear anybody talk about it anymore, but it was Paul Bear Bryant against the Saturday Evening Post.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I just wanted to hear your comments. Wally Butt was the athletic director, and Dooley was the coach of Georgia. But anyway, roll damn Tide.
Well, yeah, that is one of the most famous cases. I don't know how many people are interested in going back in time and history. Robert is up next in Iowa. Robert, go right ahead.
Hey, how are you doing?
Doing great, Robert. We need to make it quick.
Oh, okay. Alabama and Georgia is going to be a tough game, and I hope Alabama didn't win.
Glad to get you. I'm sorry you couldn't have more time, Robert. Don't forget, you can always catch the Finebaum podcast.
The Paul Finebaum Show is brought to you by Missouri. Start planning your next getaway at visitmo.com. Enjoy the show.
Hi, Football's back, and it already feels like the playoffs thanks to 1 Week Fantasy at DraftKings.com. With millions of dollars in prizes being paid out each week, every play in every game could take you closer to a life-changing payday. Hurry to DraftKings.com now. Use promo code FINE and play for free with your first deposit in this Sunday's $1 million fantasy contest. This isn't fantasy as usual. This is DraftKings. Welcome to the big time. Enter FINE for free entry now only at DraftKings.com. That's DraftKings.com.
ESPN Radio.
With the action on the court, the diamond, or the gridiron.
Comes alive.
The NBA.
The Golden State Warriors, NBA champions.
Major League Baseball.
San Francisco Giants are the champions of the baseball world.
The new college football playoff.
College football playoff national champion, the Ohio State Buckeyes.
You're home for the best in sports play-by-play.
ESPN Radio.
Last week, Julie Carroll posted a status that read, "Just had the most delicious banana ever." It got 2 likes and 4 comments. Well, Julie, Geico also wants to make a comment. What if we told you in as little as 15 minutes you could save hundreds of dollars on your car insurance by switching to Geico? With those hundreds of dollars, we bet you can find another banana equally, if not more delicious than the one you had last week. Hashtag go bananas. Hashtag savings.
Geico. 15 minutes could save you 15% or more on car insurance.
The Pirates and Cardinals have the best 2 records in baseball, and they go head-to-head one final time this regular season. Could this be a preview of next week's division series? Coverage begins Wednesday at 6:30 Eastern on ESPN Radio.